What's up, everybody? This is Chris Surratt bringing you another edition of the Car Concierge Show, the show that helps with the buying, selling, maintaining, and repairing of your vehicles. On today's show, we're going to check out a story about the ADAS system, the advanced driver systems in your vehicles, and how in the future most vehicles will have them, and you're going to pay for them. Next up, we're going to check out Hurricane Helene, as she's still tearing up part of the world and all of the aftermath, as well as how her effect on the auto industry is at this moment. And last but not least, of course, we're going to check out the strike, the port strike that is going on right now, talk about what the current state of it is, and talk about how it's going to affect the auto industry. First, let's jump into this story about the ADAS systems. And of course, I'm going to head over to Automotive News. You know, that's the place we get all our information from. This story is from today, October 2nd. It is by Molly Boygan. Report: some ADAS features are in more than 90% of new vehicles. Partnership for Analytics Research and Traffic Safety report suggests automakers prefer benefits of ADAS despite the expense and driver confusion. Some advanced driver assist features are present in more than 90% of new vehicles, according to a new report released as part of a partnership between automotive manufacturers and NHTSA. The report, published October 2nd by the Partnership for Analytics Research and Traffic Safety, found that 5 ADAS features: forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, pedestrian detection warning, pedestrian automatic emergency braking, and lane departure warning, are each in more than 90% of 2023 model year vehicles. Automatic emergency braking, for example, is present in 94% of 2023 model year vehicles, surging from 4% in 2015. Many automakers made voluntary commitments to offer automatic emergency braking in new passenger vehicles starting in 2022. Forward collision warning was also in 94% of vehicles, up from 12.8% in 2015. The report is based on data from roughly 98 million passenger vehicles in the U.S., comprising about 80% of the U.S. passenger vehicle market. Ford, General Motors, Honda, Hyundai, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Stellantis, Subaru, and Toyota provided data for 2023 model year vehicles through July 31st, 2023. More than half of 2023 model passenger vehicles have 10 out of 14 of the features included in the survey. Those features include adaptive cruise control, blind spot warning, lane keeping assistance. The report suggests that automakers believe that safety benefits and competitive advantages of advanced driver assist systems outweigh their considerable expense and their persistent consumer misunderstanding about their capabilities and limitations. Manufacturers have forged ahead with voluntary commitments as the federal government has moved slowly to regulate and educate consumers about the technology. For example, the Government Accountability Office said in March that NHTSA had not finalized a plan for educating consumers about the efficiency of advanced driver assist features and has missed time frames even though work on these upgrades started years ago. Automakers are committed to ultimately reducing fatalities in their vehicles and serious injuries, said Michelle Michelini, the Director of Surface Transportation at Meter, which operates the Partnership for Analytics Research and Traffic Safety. They look at that big picture. While the safety benefits of the most common technologies are well documented, automakers have struggled to iron out the kinks. For example, drivers have complained of injuries and near misses involving false activations of automatic emergency braking that it can engage the brake when no obstacle is present. This phenomenon is sometimes called phantom braking. NHTSA estimated in April that 40,990 people died in 2023 in motor vehicle traffic crashes. While that is a decline of 3.6% from 2022, the government and the industry are still working to prevent and mitigate crashes, injuries, and fatalities. American drivers have held on to unsafe driving behaviors that increased during the pandemic, such as speeding. The features are helping to mitigate some of that behavior, Michelini said. All right, great story. Now let's talk about the impact. So ADAS is in the majority of cars now that we know, and specifically because they're trying their damnedest to make sure these cars are safe at damn standard. Okay, But as a collision expert, I know that customers don't understand them, and you don't even really know if they're working unless you need them. Most standard drivers who are good drivers don't know and don't pay very much attention to these systems. And when, let's say, you get into an accident, this is when these systems are more important. They are important to, keep you in your lane. Their lane keep assist keeps you straight in your lane. If you start veering off, then they'll alert you. You got the blind spot monitor that, if there's a car in your blind spot, it'll send a signal, start beeping or flashing. All these features are designed to help you in your everyday driving, so it's less likely you get into an accident. But the truth is that all these features really do is they help, don't get me wrong, but if you're a good driver, they don't help that much. If you're a well-trained driver, they don't help that much. And what they really do is drive up the cost of these vehicles, because these are expensive upgrades. They're electronics. So, any new electronic that you put in the vehicle is going to be expensive. Most of these systems are run off cameras. Those cameras cost anywhere from $300 to thousands of dollars to be put in and replaced in your vehicle. So what this really does is, number one, drive up the cost of these vehicles. And it's unavoidable. You pretty much asked for it because you said you wanted cars to be safer and all of these things, and they promised these things to you. But they're going to take their cut of pie, and they're going to still charge you for these advances, and it's just going to raise the price of these cars. All these newer electric vehicles, Escalades, these prices on these cars have almost doubled to some degree because of these systems. These expensive systems that are not only expensive to put in the cars, but they're expensive to maintain. And on top of that, they're taking your ability away, they're taking the ability away from you to use that corner store mechanic to fix your car. Because all of these systems, after they're repaired or replaced, have to be calibrated. My team over at the collision center that I work at, we have our own calibration team that has to come in almost every day and calibrate these systems to these cars after accidents. So once these systems are replaced or damaged in any way, they have to be calibrated. And that's not something your average street mechanic can do. Most street mechanics don't have the technology or systems to do this. And the kicker is, most mom and pop shops like the Midases and the Meinekes, they don't have it either. So if you are to get your vehicle repaired at those places, they have to sublet those repairs to, in most cases, the dealership to get the repairs finalized, because they have to calibrate these systems. And the kicker is that most of these automakers, what they're doing is that they're only supplying the dealerships with the equipment to do these repairs, forcing the mom and pop shops to have to deal with the dealerships just to get your car fixed. So it's a good thing to have these in your vehicles, but let's understand that as you get these in your vehicles, it's going to raise up the cost, and what it's really going to do is force you to have to go to the dealership to get your car repaired. All right, so let's move on. So as you all know, we had the horrible situation of Hurricane Helene, and she tore up the world for a little while there, and lots of places are still feeling the remnants of it. Even my family up in Indiana felt it. Of course, I feel it over in California. We over here cool. But one thing that we were learning about the automotive, specifically EV vehicles, as it pertains to this Helene situation and the salt water that was flooding most of these states, it tends to not go well when it comes to electric vehicles. So we're going to check out a story about some things that are happening to these electric vehicles as it pertains to the salt water getting into these homes and touching these vehicles, as it were. Let's check it out.
Cleanup continues after Hurricane Helene in Georgia. 17 of the 56 people were killed were in the state of Georgia. Many of those deaths have been from fallen trees. As recovery continues, one of the biggest focuses for the cleanup is getting critical roadways back open.
Cousin Elf.
Our priorities right now are roadway clearance to emergency locations. We have to get our hospitals available. We have to get our emergency rooms available.
Power crews are out in force in many areas working to get power restored. At last check, there are more than 718,000 customers without power in the state. Georgia power representatives say they have about twice as much damage on their system compared to Adalia's impact on the area last year. Even though Helene is long gone from Florida, it is still wreaking havoc. Officials say salt water is causing electric vehicles to catch fire. Pinellas County near Tampa shared this video today. It did not say when and where it was taken, but it urged residents who evacuated to contact them so the fire department can check on their cars. Fox's Helene reports.
Water and the ion batteries do not mix, and they literally explode.
And they did across the city of Tampa.
You heard horns honking all in the distance because the cars were shorting out.
Andrew Eleanor heard an explosion while hunkering down on Davis Island.
The lithium battery, it got inundated and then blew up.
And this was the aftermath, a charred electric vehicle surrounded by debris after the water rushed in.
And because of the flooding that we've had some lithium ion situations.
It wasn't the only fire. This one was along Blanca Street. Except in this case, Tampa's mayor says a fire likely started by an electric car spread to the home. It was gutted by morning, nothing left.
Saw that home from the helicopter, and there's one wall left. So it's very, very tragic. Fortunately, no one was hurt.
A similar story in Seminole Heights. Tampa firefighters worked for hours to put this one out. Neighbors say water got in the garage with an electric car inside and a fire broke out. While it's unclear if the car was to blame, this serves as a warning for other owners.
If you have any equipment, any scooters, any bikes, electronic bikes, electrical vehicles that have been submerged in salt water, please do not try to power that on.
Haley Hines, Fox News.
All right, so this is a new thing for me. I honestly didn't. I was not aware of the whole, salt water affecting ion battery situation. It's a new one on me, and it's kind of troubling to me to some degree. I didn't, I'm thinking about the Midwest, as it were, when it comes to this situation with the snow on the ground and melting of snow. I wonder if these cars are prepared for that situation, for melting snow to touch these ion batteries. But of course, this is just another knowledge that we learn about EV vehicles that we didn't have before, about how ion batteries are not privy to salt water and could explode, causing massive damage. I mean, we were talking about massive damage to these homes. So it's paramount to the idea that most EV vehicles haven't been through the whole rigmarole of research development, and most EV vehicles we just don't know very much about. They haven't been on the road long enough to really put down a concrete statement of saying that, hey, we know everything about these vehicles, we know what's going to happen, and we can move forward on making sure that the world is in EV vehicles, because we just don't know enough about them at this point, obviously. Like in these situations, to be concrete on the roads should all be covered with EV vehicles. All right, so last but not least, we are going to check out the port situation. Now, everybody is aware of the port situation. They are striking at this moment. They're asking for a lot. I think they said something about a 70% raise, and they really are aiming to get the same things that port workers out in California get. That's pretty much the real situation as far as I can tell. But let's check out that story, and then we're going to read a quick story on how it's affecting the auto industry.
worker strike, something people weren't talking about 2 weeks ago. Now it's in its second day. The economy was already top of mind, and it could become an even bigger issue for voters because of these images on your screen. Chris Van Cleve has everything you need to know.
For a second day, 14 ports from Boston to Houston shut down after dock workers walked off the job. Those ports handle about 80% of the coffee, tea, spirits, and beverage imports, as well as about 60% of medical and surgical instruments coming into the U.S. Also halted, about 76% of vehicle exports. Anthony Mundy is among at least 25,000 union.
76%? They're going to talk about how most places have stocked up, but that's not true. No one planned for this. But 76% of the vehicles not coming in, it's just major issues for everybody. Let's keep going.
Workers on strike demanding better wages and job protections against automation.
We're looking ahead into the future. Going to work now at the risk of losing our jobs 5 or 10 years down the road is very short-sighted.
Morton Williams grocery stores in New York City say they stocked up on extra perishables to buy time.
If it goes a few days, there won't be much of an effect. If it goes weeks, a month, or more, there could be a very big effect. We'll definitely have higher prices, and we might have empty shelves.
The strike could cost the economy up to $5 billion a day.
Apparel, footwear, consumer electronics, home goods, decorations, food products, anything you can think of is coming through these ports. So they are vital to the economy, and it is critical that we get them back up and running.
Still, New York's governor again urged people not to rush the stores.
It's not time to be panic buying groceries or other products.
Chris Van Cleve reporting for us.
A strike by the International Longshoremen's Association is set to hit ports on the U.S. East Coast.
All right, so I kind of expect that this strike is going to go on for a little while. The demands are pretty aggressive. They're going to have a hard time writing up a contract that's going to stop the advancement of automation. You're going to have a hard time getting a 70% increase, but we all know that eventually the docks are going to cave because the government is backing the workers. I think Biden sent out a tweet saying that he's backing the workers. Pretty much just like a UAW situation, they are going to be backing the workers, and I expect it to come, to end up pretty much the same way. They're going to cause the ports to cave in. The ports are going to cave in. They're going to give out these contracts to the workers that are working now. Then, after a little while, they're going to run out of money and they're going to start laying off people. And if you've watched this show, that's our biggest problem with the majority of this stuff is people losing their jobs when it comes to these things. And this is just a bad situation, and it's going to really, really affect not only the world itself, but the automotive industry. We know that it's going to be crucially painful for a lot of auto workers, a lot of dealerships, because they're not going to be able to get, most importantly, the parts that they need to repair vehicles, and then of course parts to finish vehicles here in the States, because still there are a lot of parts for these vehicles that are shipped in, as it were. So real quickly, I'm going to read a quick story about how it's going to affect the auto industry, and then I'm going to let you guys get up out of here. And of course, automotive news. This story is from today. Auto industry risk from port strike to rise exponentially each day, analysts say. Each day the strike continues, automakers and suppliers will have to work through a week's worth of port backlog. This is from John Irwin. Each day of the port strike on East and Gulf Coast will create a week-long backlog of critical parts. That means even if the walkout lasts for only 1 week, automakers and suppliers could be feeling the impact until Thanksgiving. Industry trade experts say it's a It's a multiplier effect, said Michelle Drew Rodriguez, a partner at Consult Roland Berger's Chicago office. The long recovery period underscores the significant impact the port strike is already having on the auto industry just one day after it began. And it shows how much more of an issue it will become with each day the workers and the port operators go without a deal. The strike started October 1st after last-minute negotiations between the International Longshoremen's Association Union, representing 45,000 port workers, and the United States Maritime Alliance Employer Group broke down on September 30th. The strike, affecting 36 ports, could cost the U.S. economy as much as $5 billion per day, as imports of everything from vehicles to produce to consumer goods stops at major ports along the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico coast, J.P. Morgan analysts estimated. The automotive industry is one of the sectors that could be most affected. The ports in question handled $37.8 billion worth of vehicle imports during the 12 months ended June 30, 2024, according to S&P Global Market Intelligence. They account for about 70% of all U.S. auto parts imports, according to Alex Partners. No surprise. Initial impacts appeared muted. Automakers and parts companies said they were monitoring the situation and staying in close contact with their suppliers. Many said it was too early to know of specific impacts of the strike. Along with our industry trade associations, we are urging all parties to quickly resolve this matter and minimize the impact to the U.S. economy, a Honda spokesperson said. The strike came as no surprise to the industry, as talks between the union and the port operators were deadlocked for months. Automakers that rely on imported vehicles from Europe boosted their inventories, while suppliers worked to do the same for overseas components. A lot of suppliers accelerated shipments in August and September in anticipation of this, said Bill Long, CEO of MEMA, which represents companies in the auto supply chain. That's CAP. That will give companies a buffer to prevent worst-case scenarios in the event of a short strike, analysts said. But if the strike lasts more than 2 or 3 weeks, there could be major disruptions throughout the supply chain. The big problem is the uncertainty in this, said Dan Hirsch, America's leader of the automotive and industrial practice at Alex Partners. If you think it's going to end in 2 weeks, you probably just put 2 weeks of inventory in place. But if you think it's going to last 4 weeks, well, 4 weeks is a lot of inventory to hold. Alternatives not ideal. That would force companies to find new ways to ship vehicles and parts from overseas, whether that's by shipping to ports in Canada or Mexico, diverting to the West Coast, or non-union ports in the East, or delivering by air. No solution is ideal since each adds significant costs and lengthens supply chains, said Michael Robinet, Executive Director of Automotive Consulting at S&P Global Mobility. And the longer this goes on, the more problematic the logistics get, he said. How long the strike will last remains an open question. It could be settled as soon as October 7th, in part because of the political pressure on employers and the union to reach an agreement, said Lee Casclo, Senior Transportation and Logistics Analyst at Bloomberg. We're going to be paying close attention to the rhetoric, not only out of the ILA and USMEX, but also out of the White House, because they are feeling pressure from shipping groups and freight operators to get things moving again, Casclo said during an October 2nd webinar. Alternative parts are likely to get backed up in the event of a lengthy strike because companies in a wide range of industries will be looking to reroute cargo at the same time. Some are not built or staffed to handle a large influx of shipments, while others cannot handle certain types of cargo. You start to get the general idea that your ability to divert completely is pretty limited, Robinette said. Long term, everybody's trying to do the same thing. Plant shutdowns. Shipment delays can result in parts not arriving at assembly plants or Tier 1 supplier factories in time. The absence of even one part could result in factories being shut down and new vehicle production stopping. If your OEM has shut down a plant because of a part that's unavailable, we all know the ripple effect that causes, Long said. Yes, we do. Any plant shutdowns are likely to be sporadic, especially in the early days of the strike as companies work through their inventories of crucial components. Assembly plants in the U.S. run by Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Volkswagen, which all rely on a considerable number of parts shipments from Europe, could be impacted by the strike first, said Sam Fioroni, Vice President of Global Vehicle Forecasting at Auto Forecast Solutions. Getting engines and transmissions in from Europe is going to be a big stumbling block, he said. there's risk for every automaker producing vehicles in North America, as even domestic brands incorporate parts shipped from overseas into their vehicles, Robinette said. But should the strike last several weeks, it could be an opportunity for the Detroit 3 to gain business if inventory levels plummet at competitors. The Detroit 3 are less dependent on non-North American parts for their assembly plants in the region and could have more paint options for potential customers at dealerships than some of their competitors. This is a disruption where those competing crossovers and small SUVs aren't at the other guys' dealerships, but they're at yours, Hirsch said. If somebody needs a car, there's your sale. That could prove particularly appealing for Stellantis, which has come under fire from dealers and the UAW for rising inventory levels and could allow the company to work through the excess inventory. Lessons learned. Automakers are also monitoring how a long strike could impact the broader U.S. economy and new vehicle market. A port strike is always dangerous for the entire economy, said Jack Hollis, head of sales for the Toyota Motor in North America. I don't care if it's 1 day, 2 days, every single day of these things can cause issues for people to consider. The good news for the industry is that it dealt with supply chain shocks in recent years dating back to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic and the parts shortage and inflationary pressures that ensued. That spurred companies to regionalize supply chains to an extent not seen in decades and forced many of them to gain greater insight into the health of their supply bases. The pandemic should have taught lots of lessons, Hirsch said. Yes, it should have. Add the port strike to the growing list of automotive supply chain black swan events, a list that includes the impacts of Hurricane Helene on manufacturers in the Southeast. They've been planning on the strike and have prepared for issues like this, Fione said, but there's only so much you can be prepared for. All right, great story, great read. Always check out Automotive News, my friends. So, what are we talking about here? The issue is going to be a lot about parts, and I personally know that because of the COVID-19 situation, lots of companies should have learned from that, because the COVID-19 situation, because of the same situations not being able to get deliveries, caused parts to take months to get to places just for repairs, simple repairs on vehicles. And it was a big issue. So a lot of companies did start having, warehouses, getting warehouses, local warehouses, and filling them with parts, specifically the big three, specifically here out in California, because I know this because we dealt with a lot of the COVID issue as a collision center. Getting parts to repair these cars is adamant for our company. So the supply chain issue is going to be a big thing for me. And a lot of companies like me, and a lot of dealerships like us that are repairing cars. But of course, it's going to be a bigger issue for companies like Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen. Not as big issue for the big three, which, let's face it, is going to be a good thing for some of us. The companies of the big three based out in Detroit, they should be able to sell a lot of their cars because their cars won't require a lot of inventory from overseas to maintain or to build. So this is going to help out a lot. Not a lot, but if it goes on for an extended period of time, this is going to be a beautiful thing for Stellantis, and I hope they use it to their advantage. But I do foresee this going for a long time because they've been fighting this over for a long time. Why would the strike really, it's going to push the ports to try to get things done faster, and it's going to create pressure from the people up above, the government, the presidency, and of course you're going to see Trump step in and he's going to say something about it. Biden already tweeted about it but hasn't said anything major. Kamala Harris hasn't said anything. Even after they had the debate yesterday, I didn't hear any of the VP or the vice presidential candidates say anything about it either. But it's important, and it's going to be dire. You have to realize how this is going to affect the world, and it's going to be much like the COVID situation for a lot of dealerships and collision centers and people who repair cars. This is just another way that we can see that the world is, or pretty much the U.S. is having a hard time. And for me, it's not a coincidence, guys. This is happening now during the presidential election time. It's not a coincidence. Most of these things, the P. Diddy thing, all of these things are not a coincidence that they're happening now. They've been fighting over these contracts for months. They could have struck months ago. But why now? You know why they did it. Because with the presidency up for grabs, the unions or the ports can use the presidents to get the others to do what they want them to do. And I'm telling you, it's going to be almost exactly like a UAW situation. We're going to see a Sean Fain come out of this situation. He's going to take the leads. I watched one of my favorite content creators early today, and he had the Sean Fain of the Shoreman on there. I can't remember his name, but he seemed like an old school gangster to me. But that's all that's going to happen. This is just another ploy, guys, another thing for us to pay attention to, another thing to get our minds a little bit off of the presidency and all the other crazy things that's going on in the world. So, that being said, thank you for tuning in. I'm your boy Chris Surratt. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And let's try our best not to get into too many car accidents. Because if this continues, if you get into a car accident or your car breaks down, it could be down 4 months. And I'm out. Peace.